Welcome, any and all. We will be starting momentarily this episode about Hamilton. See you in a bit. Welcome, any and all, to Views in Paradox, a show where we typically discuss theatrically released films, but today we'll be doing something a little different and discussing a streaming release of a theatrical production, namely the smash hit Hamilton. With me, as always, indelible Rochelle Racine.
Hello,
Welcome.
guys.
And joining us for the first time is Andrea Redmount.
Hi.
Welcome. I realized I left up the handle from last week, so I'm just gonna mute that. So, it has your name right, but it had the wrong @. So you can just tell us if you feel like it at the end of the episode. So this week we're gonna be talking about Hamilton, which was released on Disney Plus ahead of schedule, almost a year ahead of schedule, in order to give us a little something of a treat during this quarantine time. And we're going to kind of talk about whether or not we deserve it today. Do we deserve nice things in this quarantine time? I'm not really sure. So we're kind of gonna do our little rundown of the film. Before we do that, I just want to say, if you're new to the show, this is a spoiler cast. We do this discussion on the premise that you have already seen the material, and this way we don't have to go point by point. When we've tried to do plot synopsis in the past, it always runs us a little bit long, so it's nicer if we can just kind of assume you know what we're talking about. So if you haven't seen Hamilton, do yourself a favor, go watch it, and then come back and consume this sort of content. Otherwise, it might be a little confusing.
Take your shot. Go watch Hamilton.
Yes, I love it. Also, just right up top, if you're watching and you like the show, please give us the thumbs up, little thumbs up button, and subscribe if you haven't. New subscribers, welcome. and if you are subscribed and you do like the episode, maybe consider hitting the little bell button. It'll give you a notification. If you don't want the notifications, that's fine too. I understand. But those things do help us out. We got a few extra likes on the last few videos, so to anyone out there who gave those, thank you. I think it has helped us a little bit because our views are at least they're inching higher.
Yep.
So, Rochelle, why don't you take it away with some of the facts about Hamilton to get us started?
Okay, so to give a brief synopsis of what it's about, it is about Alexander Hamilton in real life. He's America's foremost founding father and first Secretary of the Treasury. So this is obviously on Broadway, and it opened at Richard Rodgers Theater, which I've been there before. I just wanted everyone to know that.
What did you see there?
In the Heights.
Nice.
And this adaptation is with the original Broadway cast. And it was directed by Thomas Kail. Am I pronouncing that right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was
I don't know how else you'd pronounce that.
It was written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who, if you don't know who that is, and then Ron Chernow. Sorry if I butchered that, Ron. And then
he wrote the book. He wrote the book that inspired this. That they roughly based it on.
Yes. So just a couple things that John and Andrea had said before we went live, which I thought was interesting, was that so far Hamilton has made $1 billion in box office sales. $1 billion. right?
Yes, correct.
Billion.
Yeah, over $1 billion. That includes touring companies as well, but that's just in ticket sales alone.
Wow. And then it was sold for 75 million and $2 to Disney.
Yes.
If you don't understand that reference, John, you explain it better.
Oh yeah. So Disney won't put up R-rated things on Disney Plus. So as sort of a contractual concession, they are only permitted one F-bomb per R-rated or per PG-13 material. It seems pretty arbitrary to me, but that's just how the MPAA rolls. Lin-Manuel went on to Twitter and he explained this process, and he ended it with the fun quote that I gave exactly $2 in order to get this onto Disney Plus.
And then one last thing is this was filmed a week before the original cast had left the production.
So one of their final.
Yep.
And this is also
Andrea,
and this is 2 shows that have been cut together. I wasn't able. I don't know how they broke that up, but I do know it was 2 performances that they drew from. So
and when you film theater, that happens a lot. That they will film multiple productions and smush it together so you get the best.
Yeah, stand-up shows all do that too. Pretty much 2-1. They go 2 shows and then pick the best. So I can only imagine that Jonathan Groff's bit must have been worse on one of the days than what we saw in the film. I was reading, apparently he's a notorious spitter, and that like
really?
I read this review who's like a Broadway reviewer, and he's like, he's a great performer, but I do tend to want to sit back in row 6 or 7 when I go to one of his shows.
And that's also not an uncommon thing either for those of you who don't know musicals. Just to get that much diction out, you get a lot of spitters. You
build up a lot of saliva. It's not like film where you can look perfect all the time.
I bet.
That's live.
And when the nearest audience member is 20 feet away, who cares how much you're spitting? Your scene partner might, but the audience can't tell.
Maybe the orchestra in the pit.
Oh, the poor orchestra.
Right? You're like, ooh.
We still have to have Andrea introduce herself.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I have to say I loved King George III. It was my favorite character. Okay, that's great.
So Andrea, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of, why we brought you onto this particular episode.
So, I'm Andrea. I'm John's sister-in-law, fun fact. But I also do have a background in theater. I have a bachelor's degree in both theater and history. I kind of started my career as a dramaturg, which is basically I do research for theater. So Hamilton is totally my jam. But I have also stage managed. I've directed. I have worked lighting. I have worked sound. I have been on stage. I have been off stage. The theater is kind of my world. I do also, my graduate degree is in children's media, so I do have a bit of a film understanding as well. So that's kind of why John asked me as opposed to any of the other plethora of theater people in his life. Because I'm a little bit in both worlds.
Yeah, I actually saw a play directed by you, Assassins, which also deals with some presidents and such. That was a fun show. Even if there wasn't a ton, like the audience was a little thin, but the show itself was good. So
yeah, it's not the most popular show in the world, but it's a weird, fun show. So if you enjoy a historical musical, I would suggest checking out Assassins.
We kind of to get to our headline, our episode title. There was something I just want to talk about kind of up top before we kind of pick apart and gush over the performance itself. Is there was a little bit of controversy upon its release, as has been a theme with a number of the films we've done on this show. Actually, controversy. I know, which I can't spell if you didn't know. Yeah, a number of people were angry. Apparently, there was a hashtag going around, cancel Hamilton. And the argument being that the show glorifies or aggrandizes slave owning founding fathers, and I think that this was a button that's getting pushed, particularly this year in this moment, with the recent ongoing protests for Black Lives Matter. And I think a lot of people are upset in general and kind of like, looking everywhere they can kind of for a fight. I'm curious about what you guys think about it. My 2 cents was kind of that I feel like essentially it's coming from a well-intentioned place, but I also think it ignores a lot of what the show is, and not just from like a historical standpoint, because it's obviously a dramatization and an interpretation, but to me it also isn't terribly glorifying of the founding fathers, maybe with the exception of George Washington, where they're all kind of presented to be, I thought, extremely flawed. And it's sort of a story about, to me, how humans, even when they're trying to do good, are still human and are still very flawed. So I personally don't don't see a kind of the necessity to cancel Hamilton. But I do think it's just something where there's a lot of raw emotion coming on, and people are trying to rally to anything they can. I don't know. What do you guys think?
And I think it would be an interesting critique if it didn't come with Cancel Hamilton. It's one of the few shows that exists in the theater community that is truly for people of color. So by canceling it, you're saying get rid of a show that is for people who have been historically discriminated against in the theater. You're taking away roles from people who do not get a chance for roles. I also, you mentioned George Washington being the only sort of glamorized character. And I saw this interview with Chris Jackson, who played Washington. And when he first got the role, his first thought was, how do I reconcile the fact that, yes, he was our first president, and sure, he was a great leader, but he owned people. He did some horrible, atrocious things to other human beings. How do I rectify that? How do I justify that? And he came to the conclusion that he doesn't have to, and that the show doesn't ask him to. There's even a moment at the very end of the show, and it's really small, and I didn't notice it until my second watch through, but it's at the very end when Eliza says, I fought against slavery, or I spoke out against slavery, excuse me. And George Washington happens to be standing directly behind her in that moment. And he makes this face that is like, oh shit, I propagated that. Oops. Like, I should not have been doing that. So it's like great acting choice to actually sort of try and justify a man who proudly owned slaves.
Yeah, like clearly Washington's priorities were not social justice oriented so much as they were just wanting to be away from the monarchy and like escaping the feudal system. And we can kind of hang him dry for that today, but we are in a very different place. What's that, Rochelle? Sorry.
I might get a ring on my door. Hold on. No, I just got a package delivered, and sometimes they ring the doorbell and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
But what's your take on it, Rochelle, if you've got one?
All of everything you guys just said, but also like we have to realize that this is still a really fresh wound, and so we can't negate that sensitivity that's there.
Yeah,
it's a fresh wound still, even though it's 400 years later, right? So like,
and this isn't even 400 years, right? Like this,
right?
This takes place.
This is during the time
200, and it was making
like,
me.
Are we supposed to gloss over that?
Yeah.
and it's on top of that, it's entertainment. Like there's the glorifying of it is more satirical, and as well as this is how it was viewed then. So it's like the satire along with like the actual historical accuracy of what's going on. And I think that him only or widely casting people of actors of color, I don't want to say makes up for it. That's not, but it's like,
but it's an active attempt to
this
counter.
is all deliberate on his part, you know? So like, yes, I see the need for the sensitivity, but like, as Andrea was saying, like, look beyond that and see what else this production does for not only theater, but the people of color.
Yeah, it's a conversation starter too, which is another reason why I think it would be really unfortunate to sort of pull it from anything or to, quote unquote cancel it, because it does get people talking, and it gets them talking about things like the fact that the founding fathers weren't so perfect. We live in a society where very quickly after presidents have gone, we tend to like memorialize them, both literally and figuratively, and it turns them into very inhuman and idyllic figures. And I think that this actually does the opposite, where it grounds them and it makes you think about how they actually would have been as people, even though it's an interpretation, and it's not trying to be like exactly, it's not trying to be like a picture perfect depiction. It's really more about the heart of the story of just the human struggle and just how crazy life is, and how multiple people can be trying to do good things and still be very much at odds with each other. I think the whole Jefferson Hamilton dynamic speaks to that really well, where like, clearly they both want very similar kinds of things for the country, like a free and liberal place, but they have very different ideas about how to go about that, and even what freedom means, right? It's just one of these things that we're constantly trying to figure out.
To this day, I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
So
I do love on this note that the bit in the show where it's like one of the last songs where they're asking Hamilton to choose, and they're like, we know it's lose lose, we know it's like all the same stuff you always hear, that like we've got two bad choices, Jefferson and Burr, like we hate them both, but like if you had to pick, because it just feels
in that election, it was three bad choices because John Adams was running. Like,
yeah, John, who's not even in the show, but he's clearly referenced in a not warm light. They don't seem to care much for Adams in this show. This was I think we're all in the same boat here when I say that like I'd heard the soundtrack a number of times, but I'd never seen the show. So this was my first time seeing it, and I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between listening to it and watching it, because it's a different experience, although obviously a similar one. I at least to me. Rochelle, what was your kind of take on how is it different this time around seeing it?
First of all, I want to just say that most people are in our boat.
Yeah.
They've heard the soundtrack before the production because it was pretty unattainable.
Yeah. There's probably another $1 billion in album sales. I mean, don't quote me, but
most likely, honestly. And so, anyways, with that said, I'm really glad that we had access to that, because this is a very overwhelming show.
There's a lot
in multiple facets, and like it's a lot. They're throwing a lot of information at you. The style of the music is very overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. So if you didn't have that ability to listen to the soundtrack prior to going to view the production, I think that you would miss a lot of the nuances.
Yeah, you might need it took me a couple listens to the album to kind of
Exactly,
everything,
exactly.
you
So
know?
like put that with visualization, and it's too much on our human brain, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm totally the opposite. I tend to love going into the theater blind, not knowing what to expect, and letting the entire show as it was intended to for me to be for me to consume it, to be consuming it that way the first time and then discovering nuances. Of course, I have listened to the album, I can't even count how many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
But when I started watching it the first time, I sat there thinking, I kind of wish I hadn't listened to the album, but this was new. Because there's something truly amazing about having no expectations when walking into.
Oh, I completely agree. I tried holding out and not listening to the album for some time because I wanted to go see it, but getting tickets was fucking impossible.
Of course.
I did that lottery. I
it.
submitted to the Hamilton lottery. I can't even tell you how many times, just kind of hoping to get lucky. I had a friend who actually won the Hamilton lottery and got to see it fairly early on, I think with the original cast. I was so jealous because
Yeah.
I've been like, I'm doing it all the time. Anytime that that Brianna was available, I would, if I knew she could make the show, I would apply. And I did that for like, I don't know, like the first couple of years it was out before I gave up, and it was like, it's never gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why I listened to the album up teen number of times, knowing that I would probably never get a chance to see it until it was coming to the community theater circuit.
Yeah.
Like, which
go ahead. Sorry.
It's not the same. But yeah, I do love that experience of walking into a theater and having no clue what I'm going to be listening to. That was my experience within the Heights, which is Lin-Manuel Miranda's first show. And it's if you love Hamilton, go check out In the Heights if you have.
We'll do that. We'll do that movie. Yeah, we'll do that movie when it comes, whenever the hell.
I have to just vent. I am so freaking mad at COVID for not letting me see In the Heights. Like, that is what pisses me off the most. Done. Okay.
Yeah. But I walked into that one blind and was just like crying the entire time. It was so good, and it was everything I wanted and didn't know that I needed. So I kind of wish I'd had that experience with Hamilton, but I had expectations walking into Hamilton.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, my expectations were exceeded. It's an amazingly done show, but I wish I hadn't had any.
Yeah, I'm that way with movies too. I do feel like listening to the album there's very little left out of the show.
Oh,
there's
like nothing left
there's
out.
like two.
There is
there's
like one
two
scene that I can
scenes.
think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like the John Lawrence death.
Mm-hmm.
And which is like it's like a minute maybe of music that's not there, and then near the end there's like some bits with again the same actor, the son, Hamilton Jr.'s death. There's like a bit near the end of that they cut out from the album, but almost the entire thing is there. What I got, the context that I got out of it was largely who is singing which parts. Like, I had no idea that Peggy had so many lines, because all I recognized from the soundtrack was "and Peggy," the Schuyler sisters. So it was nice to kind of see who was singing what. I got a lot of context out of that and was kind of like, oh, okay. I did, there was a number of lines where it was like, even some of the ones that you maybe should recognize, like Aaron Burr has a number of lines that I didn't realize were his.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was in as much of the "it must be nice to have Washington on your side." I thought that was mostly Jefferson and Madison.
Yeah.
And to realize that it's mostly Jefferson and Burr was interesting.
Yeah. So while I feel like kind of segueing from that, what did you think of the staging and of the actual production of the show, costume, choreography, use of the stage? Andrea, you wanna, since you've got some experience attempting to do this sort of thing?
Yeah.
What did you think of it?
I freaking love the turntable. It's my favorite thing. The camera does make it a little obsolete we'll talk about more about the camera later.
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
sure.
we'll go to that next. I
But
think.
but because in theater, you basically are just given one wide shot, and that's where everything lives. That how you fill up that space is so important. And I mean, lighting can help with we need your eye to go here, but you know, it's not the same as the film world of the wide shot versus a mid shot versus a close up. That those don't exist. And I love how
Yeah,
this
it's just
show
like
uses the space.
downstage versus upstage.
Yes,
It's like as
yeah,
close
you
as
can
you
be stage
get
right,
to
stage
that.
left, but yeah. And the what really gets me are those moments that they choose stillness, because so much of the show is frenetic and so much movement and high energy, and then the choices when moments are still becomes so much more powerful.
Yeah, I love that King George like doesn't have choreography. He's
Yes.
just he walks. He's got his little preening walk,
Mm-hmm.
and then he's just there, and it's all vocal and facial.
Yes.
It's like all you kind of get.
Yeah. And I find Burn so powerful because that right before it is that we're never going to be president now, never going to be president now, with like things flying all over the place. And then you hear the musical transition first, and then suddenly the stage is empty and Eliza virtually does not move. And I feel like that is so powerful after that very frenetic craziness. Yeah, I think it chooses its moments of loud and big and small and still really, really well.
Initial thoughts, Rochelle, on staging, choreography, or any other elements, just like of the production.
I found myself trying to just like translate it into what it would be like to watch it live. Honestly, it was a little jarring having it cut between everything. So it was hard for me at first, like first watching it in the first 20 minutes to keep up. But then once I kind of got used to it, I really started to enjoy it. I also love the turntable. Oh my God, I was there for that. I think it translated really well on camera personally. And the juxtaposition of the stillness and like, the crazy movements was really cool. My favorite, like I said earlier, was King George because he didn't have any choreography. It was all his facial expressions, which also kind of left me to wonder how that would have played out in theater. Would I have loved his character as much? Because
I feel like his timing and delivery is pretty spot on, like throughout. I think it would hold.
Yeah.
Yeah. His in particular, I actually think that I would like better to just see it kind of plain.
Yeah, it was his performance that shocked, to kind of semi go back to what we had just talked about of his performance, Jonathan Groff, his performance kind of shocked me and was not what I was expecting based on what I'd heard from the album. The other one that I was surprised by was Aaron Burr. There was this, because I knew he was narrating, I knew that, but there was this fake smile that was plastered on his face up until
Smile
wait
more.
for it. And then like wait for it, it's the first time that you hear what Burr is actually thinking. And like I've always loved that song, but there was this moment of aha, this moment means so much more because Hamilton is not there. It's only in his head. And so like actually seeing that on stage on film, on stage, whatever, but actually made a huge difference in how I saw that character and his character growth.
Yeah. The variety of what's the actor's name who does Burr?
Leslie Odom Jr.
Yeah, Leslie Odom Jr. The variety of his performance is incredible. I found myself liking it more as we get deeper into the show, but I also think that that's intentional because, like you said, he is just kind of very fake. His character is just presenting you a facade, and like as we get deeper, I think his performance also matches it and gets richer throughout. So his was one that, like I liked his character on the album, but I had a different kind of appreciation for it watching it. Also, his performance, I don't know if this is a critique, but it sounded the most different to me from what was on the recorded album. Like he goes a little bit higher sometimes than I recalled listening to it. And maybe it's just, and I feel like it was something that I thought about more in the first half during his earlier songs, where I remembered having this like really deep voice, and he kind of, fluctuates a little higher. But I do think his accolades were well deserved. He did win the Tony for best lead performance, right? I forget how they exactly.
Yeah, it's best actor versus best supporting actor.
Yeah.
Because he was up against Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah.
So like there were people up against each other in that show, and yeah, Leslie Odom Jr. won. There's
a fun parallel that I heard online, that like in Mozart, which has a very similar kind of storyline of jealousy and between rivals. So like in the movie Mozart, Salieri is like very jealous of Mozart, and those two actors were also up for best actor at the Oscars, and it was the guy who played Salieri who won that one as well. So the jealous party, I guess, has an edge, just like people like that kind of gray area, I think. I thought that was a fun comparison.
Yeah.
That I saw.
I mean, also to be fair, Leslie Odom Jr. has a better singing voice than Lin-Manuel Miranda, so
yeah,
I think I would have chosen Leslie Odom Jr. as well, just based on vocal performance.
Lin-Manuel has a very odd voice. Like in general, it's very like nasally, like throaty. Like he doesn't seem like he's singing from the gut. He always seems like he's like singing from his head, kind of. But he originally wrote In the Heights to give himself a leading role. Like, like he was aware that nobody was going to cast him as a lead. So he did the harder thing, and he's like, I'll just write a show for me. Like,
and
good for him.
EGOT.
Yeah. Does he have is he in the club? He's in the EGOT?
Yeah, he's in the club.
What do you get the Emmy for? Do we know? Offhand? The E and the EGOT? Because Grammy, Oscar, Tony makes sense, because I know he got one for Moana.
Did he actually get it for Moana? I thought he had lost it.
No, he got it for... Well, now you got me wondering.
Looking it up.
Some research going live. I like it. Sorry. What?
He has won an Emmy.
For what?
Emmy, hold on. He won an Emmy like 6 years ago.
So before this. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, he used to write music for Sesame Street, so I wouldn't be surprised if it came from that.
Did he really?
Yeah. He has this whole rap about it that he wrote. Like how he was given this like sheet that had all of the voice parts of the Muppets. And then he just like ends it with Grover is a tenor. Like continues on. It's great.
Yeah.
Where is this? Keep talking while I find this.
Sorry. I was trying to remember. I had something and it kind of fled away from me in our EGOT question.
Yeah. Because I was talking about how Lin-Manuel Miranda's voice is not as powerful, how he wrote musicals for himself.
Yeah.
He won an Emmy 6 years ago for co-writing special material for the 67th Annual Tony Awards.
He won an Emmy for the Tonys. Great.
Yeah.
That's
if that's written correctly. That's exactly what it says.
Yeah. So daytime Emmy still counts. Still counts.
Still counts.
Yeah. So I also wanted to say that I think the costume work was great. In general, I do think Lin-Manuel does the move of putting on the coat one too many times. There's like he has to like get ready and like get in his coat in Act 1. He's always got someone helping him, and they do it like 3 times, and I was like, all right, maybe use that move one too many times, the getting ready. But that's not really a costume critique. I thought the costumes were great. I loved the end lineup, how The two of them were in black, and Eliza has she's the only one with any color on her dress, and then
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
else is in like the
Blue,
all white.
right?
Yeah, blue. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a light blue.
and then
I love how
yeah.
that's also echoed in the beginning, how everybody is sort of in this beige thing. Even Jonathan Groff makes it in the end too. He's in the one of those beige like soldier outfits.
Mm-mm.
So you don't recognize that it's King George, but I spotted
thought
him.
it was him, but I wasn't sure. Because I thought about it after the show because the wig obscures him so much that I just like didn't recognize him. Before we went live, Andrea cued me into the fact that Jonathan Groff was in Mindhunter, and I was like, "What?" I didn't realize at all it was the same.
He's also Kristoff in Frozen.
Yes.
Like he's all over the place.
Yeah, which has one of the best music videos in the second in Frozen 2.
Yes.
The Lost in the Woods.
Yes. His 80s power ballad is my favorite thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about the filming. We kind of touched on it. I think we're all in a similar boat where we felt like it was a little overdone. I did feel like it was too cutty. I didn't mind the change of angles, and I generally like the use of the crane because they clearly have a crane that does these kind of sweeping shots that kind of matches the turntable, which I really appreciated, and I liked those shots because they were more of like a medium that would like kind of move with the actors. But the close-ups I generally didn't care for. I especially thought that during...
I only like them on the King George. That was it.
See, I felt like on King George too much. I felt like they kept going close because there was no movement. The camera work was like trying to make up for it. And I felt like it didn't need it. I kind of think that it, to some degree, undermined what Andrea was talking about earlier in the contrast between movement and stillness, to where I just wanted it to like settle on a medium shot of him. Because also the close-ups, he is a spitter and it is distracting. I was distracted by it, despite the fact that I was at the same time, like, I understand why, and I'm appreciating the performance, but a small part of me is still like, just like maybe if only he could just wipe it a little bit. And the close-up just makes it so obvious where if you are in the theater, you're not gonna notice it. And if you do, you'll barely notice it. So I kind of had wished it would just like sit in a medium. I felt like it was just a little too cutty. And the close-ups I wasn't crazy about.
I don't remember the name of a play, but there is a Tyler Perry play that they did the same thing where they filmed it and released it on Netflix or something. And it was not nearly as cutty. And
yeah, I've seen one of them. He did a number of plays in Atlanta, and they showed a number of them, the old Medea material.
Yeah. And it was not as cutty, and not that I don't want to say I enjoyed it more because obviously Hamilton is but
it's in another
the
category.
Experience of watching it was easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also think it ruined dance numbers.
Yes.
Because you could not see, they would cut away from the ensemble to get to a close-up.
Yeah.
And it's like there's beautiful dance numbers that are happening.
The ensemble is kicking ass
it's
in this
kicking
show.
ass, and we can't see it. Or there's other little really symbolic moments. I think it's just before Eye of the Hurricane, where Burr, Madison, and Jefferson come and confront Hamilton about basically the Reynolds scandal, and Mariah Reynolds is standing in the background. I don't know when she appears, but I saw her appear eventually, and it's Mariah that then hands him the quill to write the Reynolds pamphlet.
Yeah, and part of the
like,
fun
how
in the theater
powerful would
is
that
being
be if you saw it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I always like when I go to live shows, like getting distracted by kind of the side cast members in the ensemble, and like just like being able to like pick out little things. And to some extent the camera work in this does kind of rob you of your ability to do that. I do like that they filmed it though. I will say
Yes.
that. I wish they would do it with more shows.
Can we keep doing this? Thanks.
Yeah, one
Yeah,
of the first.
even if it's the same,
Yeah.
film it and then don't release the original. Don't release it for another 5 years.
Fine.
That way,
Yeah.
people who can get to experience how it's intended. But for people who can't afford it, they still get to have a version of the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree
We
fully.
should touch on that. If we're not going to do that now, we need to touch on that later because that was one of the things I want to talk about.
Well, which thing?
Was this should be a viable option for every musical henceforth. Honestly.
Yeah, and I think it's good just for the historical record. Like how many amazing performances have kind of been lost to time. Also, I'll just say one of the first, like, not the first, but like I didn't see a lot of Broadway shows when I was younger, or like that type of show when I was younger. And I remember watching the filmed version of Into the Woods. And like I was just so grateful to be able to see it. And I actually think that one does a better job in the way that it's filmed because it also uses a number of shots. If you haven't seen the filmed version of Into the Woods, it's very good. And it's much more conservative with its use of the camera. Like it does go in for these kind of mediums, a fair amount, but it's usually when there's only one or two people on stage. And otherwise, if there's a lot of action going on, it's kind of holding on a wide. So I thought that was maybe a better example of how to film it. But again, yeah, not enough of these. Like so many are lost. And it's like, how nice would it be to be able to watch Book of Mormon like this? Every like 5 or so years, Broadway comes out with these smash hits that like we all hear about. Your Phantom of the Operas, Inexplicably Cats. Most recently,
I
Book of
did
Mormon
see
before
Cats
this.
on TV. Like PBS happened to film it and show it, and
That's
that's
right,
how
they
I saw
did.
Cats.
But yeah, it'd be nice to like have these kind of benchmarks because so many, even just like medium-sized productions, like one level down from your Hamiltons, like just never get filmed. Like Kinky Boots is a big one a couple of years back, and there is a film of Kinky Boots, but I don't think it's quite the same.
No, because the
it's a
film is
different
what the
piece of
musical
art.
is based on. It's not the other way around.
Yeah.
So.
So it'd be nice to have access to this. I hope it's a trend that continues. And I agree, like the delayed release is fine. Theater companies got to make their money or whatever.
I think they're still going to make it anyway, though, because the people that want to see it live are going to go see it live.
Yeah.
Really.
It's true. And productions like this have the potential to make insane amount of monies. Like we mentioned, this already made $1 billion. Phantom of the Opera has made over $10 billion since its release. Like that's crazy money. That's as much as like the entire Marvel MCU release, like box office release.
Wow,
like it's close to it.
I mean, selling tickets for 30 odd years will do that.
Yeah, and like at like $100+ a pop.
And especially as the ticket prices keep increasing.
Yeah.
They get to.
And Hamilton's crazy expensive. Although I will say they've done a lot of cool things with Hamilton, with like the lottery, with bringing in schools to see it. They've done a lot of kind of cool things like that.
There's also the Ham for Ham. So people who are waiting online outside got a mini show before the show. So there would be actors coming out and they would do a very specific thing for that day.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I think that has kind of stopped. But if you look up Ham for Ham, you'll find things on YouTube of the actors coming out just to entertain the crowds beforehand.
Those actors were working their asses off. But I have a big problem with this kind of like exclusive nature of art. Like art should be like religion. It should be accessible to everyone. And I do not think that overall keeping it so locked up just for the elite is good for that show, really, at the end of the day, right? I mean, like I said, people who want to go see it are going to go see it. So why take away from the people who are not economically able to do so?
Yeah.
And you're going to still make some money. You know, make it rentable for like $6.
Yeah. Yeah, there's any number of things they could do. And they were originally going to put this out in theaters, which, you know, I like just kind of being able to watch it at home and not having to kind of pay the premium
I would have
to
been
the theater.
upset. Not that this was bad, but I would have been annoyed if I had to go pay $22 to go see this in theater.
Yeah, for what feels like a badly edited theatrical production. I'm so mad at how much the camera cut. It's so undermined performances, that stillness that I was so fond of. Like it felt like the camera did not trust the audience. So it's like they're gonna get bored if we sit here for too long, kind of ruining the moment.
Yeah.
And Rochelle, you mentioned that like the actors, how much they worked in the like their butt off in this, and the show itself, just one performance of it is clearly exhausting on both a physical and emotional level. Like, you know, near the end of
you do 2 shows a day.
Like at the end of the show, Lin-Manuel Miranda looks like he's legitimately bawling, and like he has to like smile to Eliza at one point, and he's just looks like he's forcing it through just like all this grief and pain. Like they're like it's
Philippa Sue as well, who plays Eliza, is like the amount that she has to just cry and come up, like get this emotion out. The last moment of the show is this emotional outcry from her.
Yeah.
So like that's got to be just so much.
Yeah, it's
emotional weight of the show is on her shoulders.
In talking about emotion, this show gets to me. I don't know. It's a number of things, but like, and I think part of it is the fact that I'm already familiar with it. But there were certain moments where just like these musical cues would come up, and I would just like, I'm just like immediately affected by it. When I watched the second half, I was just like bawling. I was like really, I watched it by myself, partly just because I knew it was going to get to me a lot. And I wanted to kind of let myself be able to feel it. But like, just, I don't know, something about loss and the themes of loss and his kid dying, like, and just the emotion in those songs. Like especially near the end of the play, just I don't know, they just cut me straight to the heart. Like how did you guys react to this on just kind of an emotional level? Rochelle, what do you want to?
I was expecting to cry a lot more just because everyone's like, you're gonna cry so much. So it's kind of like like we were talking about earlier, when you go into something with expectations, it kind of changes your experience, right? Sure. So I mean, I did cry at the very end as it was closing. I shed one single tear. It was very dramatic. But I mean, it did make me feel things. But as for someone who like, I don't know if you guys remember this movie, but it's a terrible movie. It's called Mighty Joe Young. It's about a giant gorilla. He falls off. He falls off of a Ferris wheel and almost dies. Like that's the kind of shit I cry. Like, and I cried the entire time in Moana. I'm a crier. So the fact that I didn't cry was very interesting to me, but I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I just went in with this expectations that I was just going to bawl the whole time and be amazed the whole time. And it didn't sit in me the way I expected, I guess.
That's interesting. Andrea, what about you?
I mean, I cry at a good meal. Like I'm that person. So yes, I cried. Though what I did find interesting was I did not feel it when John Lawrence died. But when Philip Hamilton died, like I was gone.
Yeah, Philip gets me. And just the song that follows, the Unimaginable.
Yes.
I was like,
just tears.
I like couldn't get through. I could barely get through that song.
Yeah. So then the acting choice of Madison when during the "Can we get back to politics, please?" and he's like, "Yes, please," and comes across the stage with his handkerchief. Like I was watching it with me, my sister, my brother, and my mom, and we died laughing because we were all just bawling our eyes out. And then there was suddenly that, like, it's such a great moment of reprieve that's not on the album.
There's some great transitions throughout the
Yes.
show because it goes from like very like kind of crazy song to very emotional to like fun to like rap, and I really liked a lot of the transitions. I want to talk about some of the music, in particular. Rochelle and Andrea, I know you guys were kind of talking in our prep about like references that are in the musical, things like this about the rap and that kind of thing. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on the music itself.
Okay.
Yeah. Rochelle.
So I really loved like the R&B and jazz like injections throughout like the hip hop, which is what pretty much takes over the soundtrack is the hip hop, which in the Heights was like a much smaller portion of it. It was mostly like Latinx type music, like bachata and merengue and things like that. So that was kind of neat to see this like hip hop heavy show injected with these other elements. There was a lot of rap. What's the word I'm looking for? Someone jump in.
References.
References. Like it's
Illusions.
it's riddled with it, like lots of odes to old rappers, new pop singers, R&B singers, etc., etc. I think the most obvious one is the Biggie going back to Cali when Hamilton spells out his name.
EX.
Obviously in direct relation to going back to Cali. Yeah. I was good. I can't do the Alexander Hamilton one yet, but I could do the Biggie one. So that was the most obvious. I think my favorite.
Favorite stuff. I was gonna.
Go ahead.
Yeah. First, I'd like to hear Andrea before we get into favorites. Maybe.
Okay.
Just some general thoughts that you had or observations.
Yeah, one of the things that I loved is how, especially with the rap, like, I mean, once you get past the opening number, because the opening number's job is to be like, here's the world, get an understanding of what you're going to be living in for the next 3 hours. So it's exposition, but it's not as much story, if that makes sense. So then when we get to true, like, here's the story, there's transitions in the history of sort of rap. So like when we first meet John Lawrence and Lafayette and Hercules Mulligan, they're doing the like, I'm John Lawrence and the place to be, like the very early style. And then it's Hamilton that interjects the newer, more modern rap into them. So then they transition into newer rap. So then in Act 2, like by Act 2, everybody's doing this newer style of rap, except for Thomas Jefferson, who's been missing since the late 80s. And he's back in jazz. So like, I just find that a brilliant musical idea.
Yeah. There's so much nuance in this show that we could go on and on about it. But yeah, it is really just like, I feel like it's a kind of thing where you can find new things like every time you watch it. I mean, they apparently spent 6 years making it, and it shows, that there's just the amount of care. And, and Lin-Manuel has such a distinct style. Like, we listened to the Hamilton soundtrack recently on a drive, and I kind of felt like if you dropped out the Latin kind of instruments, like it sounds a lot of the songs are very similar in their lyrical rhythm to songs in Hamilton. Like you can like spot it from a mile away, the similarities. So he's definitely got a few gimmicks that he kind of relies on, but I feel like they work. And there's in that like he tested a lot of them in shows like In the Heights, and then was like, okay, we know what works from that. Let's expound upon it.
Yeah, you can hear it in Moana too.
Oh, definitely.
He loves his lyrics. So like Moana's big song, the light of the sky and the sea, it calls me. Like you can, like, it sounds like a Lin-Manuel Miranda written song. You can 100% hear it.
Well, favorites. What do you guys? Some of your favorites? I know it's tough. I've heard Andrea sing a number of them.
So my go-to like in the shower song is Burn. One, I think it's an amazing breakup song. It hits the right place in my voice, so I sing it constantly. But I also feel like acting wise and emotionally, it's amazing. I mean, again, I'm a musical theater person, so the songs that I tend to like are the more musical theater in style. So the other one that I absolutely love is Wait for It. And I love One Last Time. The George
one they sung for Obama.
Yes, when he sang it for Obama is my favorite version of that. So you've got Obama speaking the speech with Chris Jackson singing it. Oh my God. Like,
that was crazy. I was so sad when they sang that for Obama. I was like, no, don't leave office.
But it also, especially with the way that this administration has gone, it feels so appropriate hearing Obama doing One Last Time. Knowing what we know now.
Yeah. What about you, Rochelle?
It's hard for me to choose one.
It's a show full of great songs, and they're very catchy.
I think because Lin-Manuel Miranda is so heavily influenced, it was Eminem and someone else. Eminem and shucks, I don't remember the other rapper. Common. So those are like his two favorite rappers, and he's listened to them his whole life, and this is really like the major God, I cannot speak today. The major driving force behind the soundtrack. I think I'm gonna have to go with Yorktown, because that one is heavily inspired by Eminem in his "Lose Yourself" song.
I wouldn't have thought of that, but as soon as you say it, I can hear it.
Yeah. So that would be why. Very simple answer.
Yeah. Originally, I liked the rap battles, like the cabinet meetings, were like my favorite thing. Those are fun. The more I listen to it, I do like the emotional songs a lot. Burn is a great one. The Unimaginable is like, it kills me every time. But I think the one I just enjoy listening to the most is The Room Where It Happens. There's just something about his performance in that song, and it's just such a cool song. I feel like, The Room Where It Happens is probably my favorite. It's the one I would like just put on a general playlist and have like, I listen to that one on the radio if we could.
You know what really tickled me about like that they did here and there, they sprinkled this throughout the soundtrack, was the brap brap that you hear a lot of like rappers do for machine guns and stuff.
I loved it.
Like,
I love the highlights, which I feel like plays better on the album than in this recording. And then as someone who lived in New York City for a decade, What Time Is It? Showtime. What time is it? Showtime is for those that don't know, if you ride the subways much in New York City, you are bound to see performers. They're like, local kids and dance troupes raising money for recreational projects, and they always start with "What time is it?" It's showtime. So I loved hearing that. I lived in the Heights for most of the time I lived in New York. We actually, before I knew who he was, but Brianna knew, we saw Lin-Manuel Miranda on the street, like a few blocks from where we lived once. We were coming out of a diner. And we had one of her cousins, Marcos, was with us, and they both immediately recognized Lin-Manuel Miranda. But we didn't bother him. He was with his kid. He was like pushing a baby stroller, but like he literally lived right around there. It's one of the reasons I'm really excited to watch the movie of In the Heights, because they filmed it like right where I lived, and it's very just the trailer was like so nostalgic. I really miss that neighborhood. It's really cool.
The trailer made me cry.
Yeah, and I love just like the love for New York City that he has. It is a cool city, and yeah, it's just a wonderful thing. Favorite
The guy who
performance.
played John Lawrence is supposed to be Usnavi, so
Oh. Nice.
yeah. And Lin-Manuel is the Piraguas guy, if you know anything about Inma Heights.
Piragua.
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 Piragua. That's gonna be Lin-Manuel.
That's my favorite number, by the way.
It's
Is
so
it
good.
really?
Yeah.
What a silly
Yeah.
It's
It's so silly. It's so great.
I love it. It's so silly.
So we're a little long, but I want to get maybe your guys' favorite performances in the show. However you want to break it up, either by scene or by actor or character, because I know
I'm
some.
gonna go with actor because other than King George III, I had a very clear favorite. I am like David Diggs fangirl now. For life.
Yeah.
Like I
believe
love
it's David.
Lafayette Thomas Jefferson. I'm sorry?
I said I believe it's David.
Oh, is it David? Sorry.
Diggs. Yeah.
Big fangirl.
Yeah. What about you, Andrea?
That is so hard. But I think I'm gonna have to give it to.
You
Renee
give me a top
Elise Gold-
two. You give me
Yeah,
top two.
Renee Elise Goldsberry as Angelica,
Mm.
particularly in Satisfied, because that scene. I mean, it's so beautifully choreographed along with Helpless that it's the forwards and then backward, like it's so good, and her face is so expressive.
Mm.
Um,
She's good. She's so well cast
yes.
in the Angelica role. Like, I felt like you couldn't have picked a better Angelica.
Yeah, I also want to give like.
You could have picked a better cast.
Yeah, it's so good. I also want to give another. I mean, again,
No offense to the
saying that I
current
love
cast.
I do love everybody, but another shout out to Philippa Sue, who is Eliza, because so much of that emotion lies on her, and her performance is so subtle, but you realize at the end of the show that the story is hers. And then when you think about it going back, like it's just, and she does such a good job. She sounds like,
yeah, Who Lives
but
Who
everybody's
Dies.
amazing.
Who tells
This is really hard.
Yeah, Who Lives Who Dies Who Tells Her Story is such a good finale.
Yes.
Like, it's such a good song. I'm pretty in line with you guys. I'm with Rochelle. David Diggs is out of this world in this show. I loved him as Lafayette, but as Jefferson, he kills it.
Yes. And the differences between the two characters,
He looks
just
like
in how
he's-
he holds himself, it's amazing.
He looks like he's having so much fun
He
on the
does.
show.
He looks like he's having the most fun on the stage.
Oh my god, the Never Gonna Be President Now, like
So good.
he's just milking it, and it's so appropriate. Yeah, David Diggs was my standout, and my number two would also be you just said her name, Philippa Sue. What's her first name?
Philippa Sue.
Yeah, Philippa Sue. Because I agree that I feel like her performance is so subtle, but then like, as we build towards the end, you can really feel the nuance in that performance. And like, I think that the point early in the show is that she's overshadowed by her sister, and that her sister is, the wittiest and the prettiest and, all that. But she does such a good job coming out of that shadow and like really making the second half of that show hers. Like, yeah, even from before we get to Burn, like she's so good. So those are like my top two, and I feel like they're pretty close. There's such different performances. Like, I feel like I picked the most polar opposite performances in the show. But those were those were the standouts to me. Any kind of final comments, things we didn't get to that you guys wanted to cover before I start wrapping up?
I just also found it was something that I noticed in my second watch through. There are only 2 times in the entire show where there's only one or two people on stage by themselves. And the other time it's big frenetic. There's lots and lots of people. Even if they start alone, people join. And it is oh, let me be a part of the narrative.
Yeah.
Like that very first time she sings that when Hamilton has been sent home and is feeling so much shame. And the other time is Burn.
Yeah.
Every other time there's at least a few other ensemble members, or there's lots of things going on. And those are those two moments that are just like only them.
Yeah.
I find amazing and fascinating.
Yeah, so I think overall we loved it. Maybe the world doesn't deserve Hamilton right now, but I'm glad
we got it.
Yes, I'm glad we have it.
We at least deserve it, us three.
Yeah.
There we go.
We can appreciate it. So please hit the thumbs up again if you liked the episode. Hell, hit the thumbs down if you didn't like it.
Yeah, if you hated it, hit thumbs down. That helps us too. Doesn't matter. Please comment as well.
Yeah, we actually had a couple comments. 667 Mumble said that I liked the foreshadowing of Hamilton's death. Yeah, I mean, along with the fact that they outright tell you at the beginning, I think they do a lot of nice allusions, and I think the lyrics
I'm not throwing away my shot, and then he does.
Writing like you're running out of time. There's so many good ones like this. Also, Jose commented here, our guest from last week. What does he say? He says, Ilya and I watched an interview, and we learned also that his girlfriend, his significant other was in a production of In the Heights, and she did like 16 performances of that. So he says, Ilya and I watched an interview where Lynn was explaining how he was overlooked from being involved in various projects at the same time and not having days off.
I bet.
Yeah. So, he took matters into his own hands to his great success in the end.
Well worth it, Mr. Lin-Manuel Miranda. Real quick, I wanted to bring this up earlier, but because of time I didn't. But now that it's in front of our face, let's talk about it really quick. What are your thoughts on a live action film version of the musical? I do not think it would adapt as well as In the Heights.
It's hard to say. The staging is so minimalist.
Yeah.
And it really works for the show. I was really wondering how the hell they were going to depict everything that's being said. And, they don't go out of their way to depict every little thing. I feel like it's such a rush of exposition and narrative that it would be very hard to visualize. I feel like you could easily come out with just a mess, or it would be 3 hours if you wanted to do it appropriately and give it segues between the songs. I think I'm with you. Be harder.
Yeah, I would love to see it, and if you can do it successfully, throw it at us, please. But I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. In the right hands, anything can be done right. But
Anthony, what do you think? You seem to agree.
Did she freeze?
Oh, she froze.
Uh-oh. All right. Well, Andrea's frozen. Maybe she'll come back here.
Let's give her a minute. So,
there you are.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening. I don't know if it's the Wi-Fi that's...
Yeah, we were just curious about your thoughts on a if they were to do a film.
She froze again. We'll wait. All
right. Either that, or we could start wrapping up. Subscribe.
Right, thanks,
Thumbs
Jose and 6-7 Mumble, for your comments. And you guys watching now the replay, what do you guys have to say about this? Did you agree with us about how as far as the film adaptation went? I cannot speak today. It was really choppy editing, or did you love it? Would you be down to actually see a live action proper film version of the musical? Let us know your thoughts.
And since we have you,
yes, I'm back.
What were you with us on the film?
For the most part I'm with you guys. I missed half of that conversation because I froze. I don't know what happened. Wi-Fi is weird.
Internet,
yeah. I like what we got as an adaptation. I don't want a film version.
Yeah,
the
I don't need it. I feel like
stylization is part of the point.
I think it would just be like Into the Woods, where people would just be like, "Go see the play," you know.
Yeah, or
Um,
Les Mis. I think it would end up being more like the Les Mis movie, which was like, I love Les Mis, but the movie was eh. So,
I actually
and I
didn't. I missed that one.
don't worry about it. Like, you
That's
don't
kind
need
of
to
why
see
I missed it, because I heard a lot of that.
the stage version is so much more powerful. It's so much better, and I think the same thing would end up happening.
Mm.
Whereas, like,
Now I'm all worried about In the Heights. Please don't fuck.
In the Heights looks amazing though.
Yeah.
If the trailer's anything to go by,
and In the Heights is a very personal, like, it's a story of people
Yeah.
as opposed to this grandiose thing.
yeah,
Right.
it
So I
doesn't
think
cover
the
20 years
smallness
or
of
whatever.
In the Heights is working towards its favor.
I agree. It's definitely like if you're familiar with it, you probably will agree that it's very good for a proper film adaptation. Like, it's just written that way, honestly.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
could go either way.
So, next week we are going to be doing a new film. This was originally supposed to get a theatrical release. It is now going straight to Hulu. It's called Palm Springs, starring Andy Samberg. It's like it sold at Sundance for a record amount, like 17.5 million. It premieres on Friday, so it's not out just yet. Please give that a look-see before the next episode. Usually we've done films that are a little bit more well-known, so we'll see how it goes doing something brand new. But it's supposed to be good. Like, we had good critical reception. We'll find out together. So give that a watch and then join us next week. Andrea, thank you for joining us. Is there anywhere the people can find you on socials or anything like that?
You can find me on Instagram, though I'm not exactly an interesting person to follow. I know I'm selling myself real well here, but most of what I post is like, look at the family. Yeah. So, I mean, you can find me there if you want to follow me. Power to you, but
what's that?
I'm pretty lame on social media. It's at Andrea Redmount.
Easy peasy. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I messed up.
Yes.
Rochelle, where can the people find you?
I'll link it below. I'm getting sick of saying it.
Rochelle, you got it's our road. You can find me at John and Paradox on all the socials. I'm on TikTok for what that's worth. Not that I've been posting anything, but mainly Instagram. Follow the show's Instagram at Views and Paradox. It's a fun one to follow. We usually put up movie posters. I'm not sure how that's gonna go next week.
Yeah, we'll see.
But the Instagram's fun and it lets you kind of just know what's going on. Also join the Facebook group. It's the Movie Club Collective Facebook group on Facebook, obviously. Until next week, watch more movies.
Happy viewing. That's
All right.
a wrap.
Bam. Cool.
Yay.